Onto this now, the Democratic Alliance abroad is calling for a date to be launched for South African citizens who want to participate in the upcoming general elections next year. The party believes that the registration delays undermine the rights of the more than 2 million citizens that are currently abroad and say that the Electoral Commission of South Africa has an obligation to provide these citizens with their constitutional right to register to vote. To unpack this further, we're joined by DA MP Adrian Roos. Mr. Roos, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Just for our viewers, their benefit, if you give us a broad overview of the major concern that the DA has when it comes to the registration to vote for South Africans living across the world.
Thanks for this opportunity. So essentially we have over 2 million South Africans living and working abroad at this point in time. And unfortunately, in terms of their right to vote, they have less rights than a prisoner at this point in time. So essentially, at this point in time, we have online registrations in South Africa. There's a voter registration weekend on the 18th and 19th of November. There were plans for in-person registrations at embassies overseas. These plans appear to have now been delayed. And then there was also plans for an online voter registration system for persons overseas or South Africans overseas. And this has been delayed 3 times now, so this is still not available. So South Africans overseas are currently unable to register to vote. And if you consider that there's approximately 2 million South Africans abroad, this is a big problem if we're going to try and do this all sometime in February next year.
Yeah, it is a big problem indeed, and quite concerning given the dwindling numbers of people actually going to the polls to vote over the last few years. Why have we seen these delays? Has there been any sufficient communication from the IEC to say these are the reasons that we've had to delay about 3 times?
Look, I raised this in the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs on the 10th of October. So I was assured that the system was on track for release. At that stage, it was there was an indication that it would be released on the 10th of October. I was assured that it was on track. And now suddenly in the last week, we've heard that it isn't, and it's been delayed indefinitely. And so unfortunately, it's something that we raised with the IEC in this meeting. If you can think back to the voter management devices in the last local government election and how they failed, and many citizens couldn't vote because of that. And so we raised this concern to say that we need to test these systems. We need to have them available early so that we can test them, get any glitches out the way, so that we don't have citizens left in the same situation again.
Yeah. What is the immediate action that the DA abroad is now looking at to address this issue?
I think the issue is that it is time that the IEC tells us what the deadlines are and what the timelines are. So as it is, we have a planned election more or less around May next year. Already because of the delays from the Department of Home Affairs in the Electoral Matters Amendment Bill in Parliament, that date is already looking like it's under threat. And so there we raised the point as well, is to say we need a proper timeline. South Africans need to know what is the timeline, when are they going to be able to vote in person or register in person, when are they going to be able to register online. And we need to assure ourselves as the DA that persons are going to have a fair chance to do that there will not be some last-minute rush that will undermine their rights to vote. And so the DA is calling for strict timelines on these things. If the Deputy CEO, Shiburi, says that the system development is on track, then we just need a simple thing like a deadline to say this is when it's going to be launched. Persons need to be aware of it. We need to be aware of when South Africans overseas will be able to physically register. And we need that sooner rather than later.
And while we do focus on the online registration, which the DA has indicated would be the best solution, the physical registration is also an important component. And I suppose the IEC will have to make sure that in that instance that there is a great accessibility for those abroad to be able to go and physically register. Tell us about concerns around that and what exactly the IEC needs to ensure that people can go out and physically register if they're unable to do so online.
Yeah, so you've hit the nail on the head. I think problems in past elections is, let's say, for example, in Australia, you would literally have to go to Canberra to vote. So you would have to travel across the entire continent of Australia to go and cast a vote, which is unreasonable. And we find now that there's a call from the DA side to say that we need to allow persons to register online now so that we can determine where there are a significant number of South Africans abroad that want to vote, so that then those voting stations can be determined in the areas that are close enough to these South Africans. Like I said, it's totally unacceptable that persons in prisons can vote in prison. The IEC comes to them and they can vote, but South Africans overseas that might be overseas for whatever legitimate reason cannot vote because they have to travel thousands of kilometers to the nearest voting station. And so we need this registration to happen sooner rather than later so that the IEC has enough time to plan where these additional voting stations will be placed around the world.
Thank you very much for that update. And of course, we'll keep abreast with the developments from the IEC as they unfold. That is the DA's Deputy Member of Parliament, Adrian Roos, joining us there to give us a sense of South Africans living abroad and them being able to exercise their right to vote.